Hello and welcome to this edition of the Evening Review. My name is Tewan Jabela, your host, and let's have a look at today's front page of Namibian Sun. In this segment tonight, I'm joined by, I'm actually welcoming back Michael Amushelelo. He's a local entrepreneur, and he is here tonight to talk to us about his latest ideas and developments as far as his business activities are concerned. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, it's actually good to be back on the show.
Yeah.
Can't remember the last time the debate that we have, but it's good to be back.
Yeah.
It was probably a couple of months now.
Yeah.
With COVID, we count them like 30 years.
Precisely.
A month is now almost like 30 years.
Precisely. Yeah. No. So tonight we are talking to you about. You made headlines last week or so. Was it actually this week? About you offering to buy Ohorongo Cement.
Yes.
And a lot of questions came people asking, where does this guy get this audacity from and stuff like that. You did this on behalf of New Wealth Capital Financial Services. Maybe to start with, what entity is this?
Well, it's basically a Namibian entity. It's registered in terms of the regulations of Business Act and all of those things. So it's basically just a Namibian company owned by Namibians. That's what it is.
What is your role in this entity?
Well, in this role is basically they have appointed me as their lead negotiator to basically offer to buy Oranga Cement on their behalf.
I see. Now, Oranga Cement. Last time I checked, the cost that was floated around when the Chinese were interested, it was over $1 billion, I think 1.5 billion.
Yes. I mean, depending on the exchange rate, the Chinese offered $104 million US.
Yeah.
So given the fact now that the exchange rate has dropped, I'm hoping the price will also come down as well.
Yeah, precisely.
Yes.
And New Wealth Capital Financial Services have anything closely, even remotely close to what is required to buy this company?
Well, here's the thing. I think we're limiting ourselves. People tend to think that you need money.
Yeah.
But what the biggest thing that you need is ideas. And then you basically capitalize on your ideas on how to mobilize resources. Because if you look at Africa, Africa is sitting with tons of resources.
Yeah.
But the problem is the people who do not have the ideas are the ones sitting on those resources.
Yeah.
That's why you've got people going hungry while we actually have the resources, the natural resources to be able to enable our people to live better lives. So I think the idea that people think that you actually need to have money is a notion that poor people have.
Yeah.
What the biggest thing that anyone can have is ideas. And our idea is that if we can somehow mobilize the Namibian nation at large to say, we want to buy these things, and then obviously try and see how then the funding modality can be done.
Yeah.
I mean, the funding can be a different issue. Funding, there's always ways to fund a project. But the idea and the notion is that we have now put our offer to say we want to buy this thing.
Yeah.
So the modalities then in terms of how we're going to pay it off, that can come later. Whether now it will be through a short-term, medium loan that we're going to acquire, or whether it's through selling equity in our company in order to raise that capital, whichever ways, the funding modalities is something that we can look at later. The big question here is that we cannot allow this important company to be run by another foreigner. Because remember, we're crying about houses, not having houses. Now, part of the reason why we don't have houses is because first issue is land is expensive. Yeah. Second issue is building materials are expensive. But now if you can somehow own a company that can reduce the building material cost of building houses, then that's a plus for the Namibian community.
Indeed. What has been Mr. Schute's response to your letter, or are you still anticipating?
No. So here's the thing. Shute obviously is just the managing director of Ohorongo Cement.
Yes.
We're basically dealing with Schwenk Cement International.
Yes.
Which is basically the German company that owns Schwenk Namibia Pty Limited. And then obviously they're the ones who own 69.8% shares in Ohorongo Cement. So we've responded, or we've written them an email, and they've basically gotten us in touch with their consultant, whom is now the one, or their agent who's in charge of selling the shares in Schwenk Namibia Pty Limited. Yes. Now,
the lead negotiator is Michael Amushelelo, a very colorful young man,
yes,
sometimes very controversial. Does that history and perception of you nationally and now perhaps internationally count in favor or against this noble effort that you're putting forth?
Well, Toivo, here's the thing. Like I've said before, how people paint you doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you paint yourself?
Yeah.
What's the portrait that you look at when you see yourself in the mirror?
Yeah.
People will always have a perception of you.
Yeah.
Some good, some bad, whatever perception it is, you can't change people's perception.
Yeah.
Perception is something that they perceive.
Yeah.
Now, I cannot run my life based on perception.
Yeah.
Now, what I have seen here, or what we have seen as New Wealth Capital, is a golden opportunity for us as Namibian to start owning means of production. Because remember, part of the reason why we're going to be languishing in poverty is because we own no means of production.
Yeah.
And when you do not own any means of production, you are basically a parasite, because all you do is just consume, consume, consume.
Yeah.
And what happens to consumers? Consumers are parasites. You also need to be a master of production. So what we're saying is, we need to stop thinking small. Until when are we only going to be running for tenders? Until when are we only going to be running for fishing quotas?
Yeah.
Until when are we only going to be setting up shabeens after one another, lining them up, queue from one road to the next? It can't be like that. So what we're setting here is a precedence for future generation to say that, but wait a second, if Amushelelo and crew could think of buying a cement plant, why is it that our discussions is to show each other who's the champion at buying alcohol?
Yeah.
Who's the champion at buying the most liquor? Who's the champion at running the highest tab in the bar? Who's the champion at running the highest tab in the club? Why don't we become champions of building industries or buying industries for that matter?
So if everything goes well and Amushelelo and group successfully acquires Ohorongo Cement, how many bank account, how many videos of your bank account are we going to see portraying how much is there?
Well, the wealth, obviously, all I need to do is take a screenshot or a snapshot of me and the plant, because the plant is worth already 2-point-something billion. That's the cost of it building. So a young black man taking a picture next to a cement plant that costs 2 billion, that already speaks to his bank account. So I don't need to show anymore my bank account, because you can already see that the bank account is 2-point-something billion. So the idea with also showing the bank accounts is to say that we can inspire young people, because remember, in this country, the only notion of you making it is when you are politically connected. Amushelelo is not politically connected. I've never won a single tender. I've never gotten a fishing quota. But I have been amazingly enough blessed with skills in my mind to be able to make millions without necessarily feeding off a system that exists. Because let's face it, the system that's currently there is for who knows who and who's friends with who. Now, many young people think that from that system they're going to benefit. Unfortunately, many of us are not going to benefit. So the idea is to actually inspire young people, because how many graduates are out there sitting with their degrees at home, but they are looking for jobs, complaining that they can't find work. So the idea is to say that there is actually a market out there in the world that you can feed yourself off from, not just waiting for tenders or fishing quotas and things of this sort. You can actually create wealth by yourself.
Indeed. And you know, you've had your fair share of trouble with the law, especially with your forex business, with a lot of your assets having been frozen. I'm thinking, of course, we don't know yet the details of how you intend to fund this acquisition if it was to be approved. But you know, banks will, for example, because you hinted earlier at a possibility of acquiring bank financing, for example, and normally they would ask assets to be put forth as guarantees, and yours are bonded now. So what's going to happen if that arises?
In that case, this is what we need to look at. What are we looking at? What are we acquiring? First things first, we're not acquiring liabilities. We're acquiring an asset that potentially worth on an annual basis close to about $500 million to $1 billion in terms of profit that is generating.
Yeah.
So it's something that is easily bankable. It's a bankable thing. There's no two ways about it. So the bank can easily, or whoever is willing to come on board and finance this thing, and then you've got that thing that you can still sell. Because remember, what it's being sold for versus its worth is not the same things. So it's something that anyone, you do not need rocket science in order to realize that even if you've got issues with Amushelelo, this is something that needs to take national priority and say, let's maintain this thing and let's retain it owned by solely Namibians.
Indeed. Now, Michael, can you state for the record, before we move to the second subject,
Yes.
Can you state for the record that this is actually a genuine attempt, it's not a gimmick of some sort?
No. You see, Toivo, the problem is we've been playing too small for too long. And when players like me now try and step on the big stage, many would try and say it's just a gimmick, but this is not a gimmick. I'm as serious can be. If need be that I need to sell a kidney, if need be that I need to sell a limb in order for this sale to go through, then that's what's going to happen. So there is no gimmicking about this. So I'm trying to make Namibians understand that we need to be serious about owning our resources. Because if we're not serious about owning our own resources, then we can be rest assured that we are going to be slaves for the next 100, 200 years to come. And this time around, it's not slavery of chains, it's slavery what we call financial bondage. Because if you currently look at our current deficit in terms of our debt in this country, it's quite huge. Now, if we are not taking this thing seriously, and this is not something to be taken lightly, Toivo, because remember, we often complain that we are not given opportunities, we're not given chances and all of these things. Now here's an opportunity. The thing is on the market. The question is, how many Namibians are willing to now hold hands and say, let's acquire this thing? Because as far as I'm concerned, there are people right now who are Googling billionaires. And then these billionaires are going to come to the country, they're going to have closed the door meetings, and the thing is going to be sold. So if Namibians are waiting yet for another billionaire to be Googled, and then they come, deals are signed, and then you are asked, what are you, none of your business, then it will be none of your business. Right now, let's make it our business to acquire Ohorongo Cement. Because as far as I'm concerned right now, we're the only ones who have offered in terms of when the thing went back on the market, publicly to say we want to offer and we want to buy it. So Ohorongo then, or not Ohorongo, but Schwenk would then obviously first need to deal with us, and then if we are unable to purchase it, then only they can move on to the next willing buyer.
Indeed. So moving on to other subjects, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I had there was a group of people who went to, they marched to the Bank of Namibia to ask that the bank unfreezes your assets in the hope that you will then pay them some of the investment that they've made into your forex business. One of the guys eventually came to the show, and he had issues with the bank itself and not with you per se. What is the status of that issue? Now,
Trevor, you need to understand, the bank is an institution, an SOE for that matter. If you see who appoints the bank governor, a State House, if you see who reports to State House, is the bank governor. So, like I said before, this thing is clearly something politically motivated, because if you look at other parties that are being handled, they are being handled with white gloves. They are being handled as per the norm, the prescriptions in terms of the laws and all of those things. But with Amushelelo, it's gun blazings, it's bazookas. I don't know what they're afraid of. Perhaps I'm that brilliant, I'm that intelligent that I obviously intimidate the powers that be. But if you look in terms of how Bank of Namibia and the government is handling this situation.
Yeah.
You can clearly see that it's something personal. And I do not know what their personal reasons is, but in terms of how they are conducting themselves, that's not how the bank should be conducting itself. The bank should always remain an impartial institution, and it should work according to the set prescribed laws that are there. But when the bank obviously then decides to go beyond that, because Toivo, if you look at how they're handling the case, these guys, they first come, they freeze my assets, they arrest me, and then only 6 months later they issue me with a letter to say that what you have been doing is contravening the Banking Act of section what. It doesn't work like that. You first approach the person, you sit them down and say, what is it here, this that you're doing here? We need to understand your model here. What is it exactly that you're doing? You don't just arrest people, freeze assets, and then what happens to the normal person who then invested their livelihood in me? These are the people who are suffering, but you are claiming that you are the ones protecting them. On what basis are you then protecting them? But then again, if you look at it, it's only known as schemes when it's supposed that it's black people doing it. I mean, if you look, I've seen around the bank saying Long Reach is also a pyramid scheme, but there's a thing called Emwe, and as far as I'm concerned, white people have been in Emwe for years, but I've never seen the bank pronounce itself that Emwe is a pyramid scheme, or it's a scheme that's contravening the. So, is the thing to say that initiatives started by black people is a no-go, and initiatives started by white people is a go area, or what? The bank needs to be clear on that as well.
Yeah, just help me understand this, Michael. You are a young man.
Yes.
You are barely 30 years, if at all.
Yes.
And why would an entire administration, an entire country, an entire government, an entire political system have anything against a small boy like yourself? Now,
Toivo, this is what you need to first understand. What is it that Amushelelo was doing? First things first, I was starting to rip the banking system apart. Now, if you would know for sure that the banking system needs to be totally overhauled. There is no way that you invest $100,000 and then you get a 5% per annum as your interest rate. And then Amushelelo comes in and then he starts giving what a bank would normally give someone over a period of 12 years. He gives it over a period of 2 months. So obviously what started happening is you started having an increase of people withdrawing their savings from unit trusts and this funny 32-day accounts, or this nonsensical 32-day accounts, and then they started investing it with me. As a result, the system was starting to crumble, because remember, the system depends on OPM. You know what OPM is?
No, not really.
Other people's money. So when the banks do not have your money on the 32-day account, because remember, banks don't really have money. They don't have money. So that's why they're always encouraging you to put your money in savings and all of these things. So that way they can use your money, quickly go borrow it to Omlaule to buy a new Jeep, and then Omlaule gets charged heavy interest rates on his Jeep, or when he needs to go buy a house, and then he gets charged heavy interest. Because let's start asking ourselves just simple question. How come a car for 2.5 million, I can pay it off within a period of 5 years? But a house for 500,000, I'm subjected to pay it off for 20 years. So this is the system that I was fighting. And obviously, when you are trying to collapse a system where a few individuals benefit, then obviously you need to be fought.
To fight back.
Yes.
Have whoever is behind what you perceive as a deliberate attempt to break you down, are they winning this battle? Are you a crash man? Are you broke now? Are you surviving?
Toivo, you see, the thing is, the one thing that they all failed to confiscate was my mind. Now, they thought them blocking my bank accounts, freezing my assets, and taking whatever possessions I had in me, that would be the end of Amushelelo. But they forgot to realize that all those things that I had were created by this thing. And for as long as I have this thing, I'll continue to create even more than what they've taken from me. Because just wait, a few months from now on, with no freeze assets and no bank accounts, I'll come back double the man that I was. And they'll wonder, Anovakwe, to what's happening here? Is this witchcraft or what is this? Because you are now dealing with them at a level of sophistication that they cannot understand, because to them they do not think. Because you remember, they don't know how to think.
Yeah.
They just know how to enrich themselves through looting. That's why they will open a bank just to close it down through looting. That's why they'll open an SOE, loot it to the ground. That's why they'll transfer a piece of green agricultural land that was productive to someone, then they run it into the ground. Like the same way they're running this country into the ground. They do not think. So perhaps also the level of intelligence also intimidates them. Because if somebody is smart, and smart in the sense that they are able to mobilize the masses and make the masses realize to say, you are being ripped off. Because the moment you try and unveil so that people can see what's happening. Remember, these guys, the only way they can benefit and the only way they can eat in peace is when the people are like this. But now when people like me come and say, hey, comrades, the people are eating while you are just here busy praying. Then the people start to realize that there's something wrong here.
Indeed. Now, in closure, Michael, you have for a very long time been flirting with the idea of politics. You always come very short of going into mainstream politics. This is an election year.
Yes.
What is up your sleeves this
well,
time?
This time around, basically I'm focusing now on making sure that the people are organized to bring about economic reality. Now, people need power. Power in the sense that they need real power. Power in the sense that they need projects where they can go and work. They need projects that can bring about livelihoods into their lives. They need money in order for them to be able to send their schools to better, their kids to better schools and things of that nature. So politics will be politics. I've realized that we'll be there, we'll make nice speeches, but what I've realized the difference between a politician and a businessman is that the one is practical while the other one is theoretical. A political person will sell you dreams about, we'll bring you a tap. A businessman will say, where's the nearest canal? How many meters is it to the canal? How many pipes do we need to buy? And things of that nature. So politics, I still understand that it's very instrumental. But what people need right now is economic reality. And that's what I'm working towards. That's why I want to buy the cement plant. After we buy the cement plant, we set up our own insurance companies, we set up our own banks, we buy the brewery because I see it's a very profitable business, plus we are the ones who are consuming it. So why not be consumers and owners at the same time? Because that's a win-win situation for me. Because every time you buy a beer, then you know it's going basically into your dividends. It's basically money that's going to come back as a big hefty paycheck. So that is the radical thinking that I'm into. So the idea is to basically get people organized so that we can start working towards economic reality.
When you say organizing people for that purpose, I'm reminded of big financiers in countries like the USA. They have elections in November there, and you have guys like Bloomberg last week or so who came out and funded Joe Biden with $100 million just for Florida alone, if I'm not mistaken. So is that the kind of role that we are going to see from people like yourself in Namibia, to say that you'll be power brokers and not active participants in the kind of politics that we have? Yeah,
because we need to understand, most of the politicians basically take orders from the powers that be. I mean, look at a guy like Sven Timme. He's a clear power broker. Immediately wrote a letter to government to say beer needs to be opened up. People need to start drinking again. And then State House immediately said, you know what, continue with your operations. So that's the role that I'm trying to look at, because you need to understand that when you do not have money, there is no way that you can bring about any prosperity to your people that you speak about. So you need to be financially stable so that you can be a man of your own, because the people who are not financially stable, they will always be begging and bowing down to the powers that be, and this is the people with the money. So for me, my role, I'm always going to try and obviously change things. Whether now is by saying, hinting to say, hey, I'm also going to become a political participant and then get others to also actively move. Because immediately after I said I'm going to become a political player, we have seen how many other political parties have jumped up and how many people have said they're going to become independent candidates and things of that nature. So mine is to always ensure that in society, their forces of balance are balanced.
Indeed. Finally, a very hypothetical question. If you were to dictate the outcome of this election this year from a person like yourself in business and also young, how would you want the results of this election to come out?
Well, first things first, this is just perhaps a hint that I'm going to give the nation. You've got a party on the one side. It's been in power for over the last 30 years. This party is building a headquarters that is going to cost them approximately 700 to 800 million. Now ask yourself really this question. Does this party genuinely love you? Because first things first, you still live in your shack. You still don't have access to clean water. You still don't have land. You still don't have electricity. Your nearest tap is 50 kilometers away. People are still drinking dirty water. So ask yourself a genuine question. Would somebody that loves you spend $700 million just for people to lift their fist every single day?
No.
Because if these people genuinely loved you, they would have taken that $700 million and said, we're building schools, we're building clinics, we're servicing land. But these people clearly do not love you. And I also have serious doubt that that money is coming from their coffers. Because I personally feel that a power, stronger force, most probably China, is the one financing that thing in exchange for maybe to get the airport tender or in exchange for another tender. Because we can clearly see that China is the one getting most of the tenders in this country. So for when you need now to understand, if a party is building an office building or an office space that's costing 700 million. Remember, this thing, unless they are going to put casinos and clubs and prostitutes and brothels into that thing in order for them to generate money, I do not see how this building is going to sustain itself.
But that's an interesting point, because last week we published a letter in Namibian Sun. It was a new perspective for me personally when I was editing that story, where an author from Amsat region, I think it's a young guy in the Swapo Youth League, saying that actually contradicting what you said towards the end of your argument now, to say we need infrastructure, and when that building is on its feet, you know, there will be office rentals, maybe some jobs will be created afterwards. We want this country to industrialize, and whether it's Swapo that is bringing that industrialization or someone else, we should be embracing that, isn't it? No,
Toivo, that's not how you embrace industrialization. What Swapo could have done with 700 million is they could have built real industries. 700 million is what would almost have cost you to set up a B2 gold mine that's generating $18 billion in revenue. 700 million is what you could set up for an agricultural farm. 700 million is what you could potentially use to revive Ramatex and build real industries. So unless they are not telling us the real truth, but what I'm suspecting is that that big, huge, fancy building is most probably a casino for the Chinese and the politician to come gamble.
Michael, thank you very much for coming back to the show, man.
Thank you.
That is vintage Michael Amushelelo making his, I think, third return to the show. And of course, talking us through this big ambition to buy Ohorongo Cement. He's saying that contrary to popular belief that it's a gimmick and a joke, he's actually very, very serious. We will see how the whole situation unfolds in the coming days. But otherwise, we wish him and his partners the best of luck. Thank you for watching.